the gentlewoman from Iowa for 5 minutes to explain the bill and her amendments.
Thank you, Chairwoman. In 2018, U.S. corporations booked nearly $100 billion in profits in Bermuda, despite having only 740 employees there. Let me spare you all the math. That's over $130 million per employee. And you see the same thing around the world, from the Cayman Islands to Luxembourg. And, you know, I truly mean no slight to Bermudans, but that's not just because the workers there are more efficient and effective than other workers here in America. I don't believe that they are 2,000 times more profitable than Americans are. It's truly because multinational corporations are able to shift their profits to countries with low or even no corporate income tax, regardless of whether they have significant actual operations there. Meanwhile, investors and the public have no consistent information about which corporations are using loopholes and what countries they're booking their profits in. We are all aware of discussions around potential changes to how foreign operations of U.S. companies are taxed. And while those are not in this committee's jurisdiction, it's clear that those would affect the profits of multinational corporations. And it's also clear that changes that Barbados or the Caymans make to their tax laws would impact profits on their corporations that booked $60 billion in profit there. And those are changes that the U.S. investors have literally no say over. So that's why I've introduced the Disclosure of Tax Havens and Offshoring Act, to give investors the consistent, comparable information that they need to understand the risks of investing in U.S. multinational corporations. And keep in mind, these are public corporations with annual revenues of $850 million or more. This bill requires basic information about a corporation's operations on a country-by-country basis, which includes things like revenue, profit, taxes paid, tangible assets, and employees. Now, I know some of my colleagues are concerned about the burden, as they say, that this might place on public companies. And I'm happy to tell you this will not be a burden at all. The way we even know how much in total is booked in these countries is because of a 2012 agreement that requires large companies, those with more than $850 million in annual revenue, to disclose the information to the IRS. So my bill simply requires that information made public for the same large corporations that are already doing it. And since corporations are already preparing this information, this would require minimal work. You know, we all know that shifting profits to tax havens so that you can reduce taxes is not a long-term growth strategy. And investors definitely want this information so that they can identify which companies are planning and investing in long-term growth. One of the reasons they want to know are cases like the one Facebook is fighting, where they're in court with the IRS over $9 billion, or when the EU is seeking $15 billion of unpaid taxes from Apple. Those are obvious risks for shareholders and those companies. And we should all understand these tax evasion strategies also disadvantage our small businesses, which is a big concern. The Main Street small businesses in my district don't have offshore entities, and I'm sure that's the same for all of you. And that's why this is supported by small business groups, and I'm thrilled to see that. Chairwoman, I'd like to submit to you now 3 letters of support for the record. We've got first from 96 advocacy groups and NGOs, including the NAACP, AFL-CIO, and National Organization of Women. Second, from 3 small business groups, and finally, a letter from investors managing more than $2.8 trillion in assets.
Without objection, such is the order.
None of us here think that multinational corporations avoiding $60 billion a year in taxes is a good outcome. But for too long, the public and the investors have lacked the information that they need to know which companies are taking these risks to squeeze out extra profits. My bill would give those investors the information and would do so with minimal burden on companies. I urge a yes vote, and I yield back the balance of my time.